Good evening, thank you all for being here. Welcome to the presentation of the book Data Rules, Reinventing the Market Economy. The book is published by MIT Press and it came out last June. And of course the book is co-authored by our two guest speakers today, Jannis Kallinikos and Cristina Alaimo, and Jannis Kallinikos. And it's a pleasure, a privilege and an honor to have them both here with us today, considering the fact that they flew from Rome just for this event and only for this event. So in what follows, and on my part I will start with a very brief introduction. I'll try to introduce the authors to you, and then I'll give the floor to the authors and they will elaborate on the book, share with us the arguments and the findings of their work, and then the space is open for questions, answers and discussions, comments and all the rest. But before I proceed, I would like to say a big thank you to KI, to the Research Center for the Humanities here, for the hospitality and for wholeheartedly agreeing to host this event. And of course, a big thank you goes to all the people of KI who helped make this event possible in the first place. So to our two guest speakers now, Cristina Alaimo and Jannis Kallinikos are leading scholars working at the intersection of information systems and organizational studies. Their work draws extensively on many intellectual currents in sociology, social theories, science and technology studies, communication theory and semiotics, as well as management and organization studies. Cristina Alaimo is Associate Professor at the SEC Business School in France. Her research focuses on the innovation brought about by database services and their consequences for organization and society, and she's also interested in studying the broader ecosystem of data exchanges in which digital platforms are embedded, and how these new platforms and ecosystems emerge and evolve. Her work has been published in journals such as Organization Science, Organization Studies, Information Society, Journal of Management, Information Systems, and others. Alaimo is Senior Editor for the European Journal of Information Systems and sits on the editorial board of Organization Studies Journal. Jannis Kallinikos is Professor of Organization Studies at Luis University, in Rome, Italy, where he holds the Cisco Chair in Digital Transformation and Data-Driven Innovation. Prior to that, Kallinikos was for many years Professor of Information Systems at the Department of Management at London School of Economics. His research focuses on the impact of data and digital technologies on organization, economic institutions, and practices. He has published widely in management and information systems and sociology journals and written several monographs, including, I'll just mention two of my favorite, The Consequences of Information, Institutional Implications of Technological Change, published by Edward Elgar in 2007, and Governing Through Technology, Information Artifacts and Social Practice, published by Palgrave, 2011. He has been senior editor for many important journals like Journal of the Association of Information Systems and the European Journal of Information Systems. Since 2019, Kallinikos is also advisor of the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences for the nomination of Nobel Prize candidates in economics. So having said all this, I'll now give the floor to our speakers, who will elaborate on data's rules and on how data rules, at least this is what they claim, contemporary world. So, Cristina and Jannis, please.
Thank you, Giorgos. Thank you for the nice introduction. Cristina, you want to say anything now before I...
Well, yeah.
So, I had also prepared a few, but Giorgos said most of these, so I will just move forward. At least as I am concerned, it's kind of presentations that shows our kind of intellectual identities cannot be shown so easily, but this is a way of showing this. This is myself, then the 3 books here before the data rules, and 150 academic articles. That's what academia is in the contemporary world now. Publish or perish is the rule in some fields more than others, because some of the humanistic fields like yours, they are more cultivated, more widely intellectual culture where the book is still very important. As you see, we also like books for that reason. But many of the fields in the Western world have moved quickly over the last 10 to 20 years to the journal publication. And what you can tell and say from journal publications is we can have a big discussion. But the format is certainly restrictive. We've written books, also Christina's intellectual identity is here. You said most of these things.
Yeah, perhaps I would like to add a couple of things because of where we are, and my background is in humanities, so despite the titles on data and the study of information in organization, or perhaps because of this, because of my background in humanities, one of the things I think we would like to do with Jannis, and we tried to do in the book, and you will hear it, and hope the message will be clear, is to work within the social science perspective, with the humanities background, and bring this focus, this interest, the approach into the study of data and technologies. So I feel particularly welcome and pleased and happy to be here presenting the book to the Center for Humanities, knowing that many of you have background in histories or art history, because that's my background too. And I feel that we have something to say in today's society and how it's developing, and this is missing right now. We need to be more present in contemporary debate on data, information technology, organization, artificial intelligence, and society in general. So.
Yeah, so do I feel. I'm very thankful that I'm here. Thank you, Giorgos. A thank to the Center, and thank you for coming tonight here to listen to us. Management and information systems are not fields that are being in the public image related with what we call broader intellectual questions. They are being thought normally as narrow fields, mostly technocratic as we call them, concerned with very narrow and specific questions. And that is probably true for quite a bit of these sciences, but the truth is also, as management has grown as a field, it has hosted more and more voices that are not exactly concordant with this narrow field of which prevails in the public imagery. And we are the typical example of this. We don't fit that. And I have in particular, which I'm a bit older than Cristina, in my 40 years in academia, I have fought several battles, and every one of us has to find battles for transforming the fields in which one is acting towards direction that one believes are being missing. This is partly our struggle with Cristina, and we will finish with this by saying why we need something we call a social science of data, not a data science, which is the predominant understanding of data. And that it tells also a little bit the background against which we wrote this book. What did we want to accomplish? We wanted to tell the story, or the narrative, if you like, that these little things we call data do more things than we imagine. In life, in personal, but also community and social life. And these things they do, they need to be unpacked and brought at the forefront today, because the extent of the involvement of the digital technologies in our daily lives, and by implication the involvement of data in our lives, is just getting increasing. We do most things through these technologies and the data they supply to us, and increasingly institutions and social processes, not just individuals, rely on data to make important choices about one or another thing. So this is the background against which we started to say some of this, to write this book. You will hear me telling several times this thing. I will begin the talk, and then at some point Cristina will take over, and then I will wrap it up in the end. So this is the structure of the talk, more or less. We want to present an understanding of data, in which data are artifacts of cognition and knowledge, not technical data points being used by computer scientists or statisticians. And this story needs quite a bit of time to be told, and needs quite a bit of effort to be unraveled. And then we will speak a little bit about what we consider a central thing today, something we call the apparatus, where data, technology and algorithms, here is a small mistake that I did as I prepared the slides at the last moment. It's not algo teams, it's algorithms. So this apparatus that is being formed by the diffusion of digital technologies in all walks of life, the diffusion of data and the technical means by which these entities are being processed and made sense of, this creates a complex apparatus that is being installed at the center of not only businesses and organizations, but also society and its institutions. And out of this, we will try to make an effort to speak about data and institutional change, and we will proceed from the interaction order, which is a standard theme in sociology, being known widely by the Chicago School of Sociology, where interaction is the fundamental thing for understanding society. We will proceed a little bit, we'll say a few things about the interaction order, and Cristina will tell how interaction order is being encoded into these technologies. And then we will speak a little bit about bigger entities like organizational forms and more structural change in the wider society, because it's not only that individuals and personal life is being changed, but also the organizations that produce services are being changed. They do so in ways that demand major institutions like the markets to think, to work in different ways. And we will touch upon a few of these things and say some of these things, see what you have to say, and then we will conclude up by presenting our case, why we think that we need to have a social science of data, where data is being analyzed as socio-cognitive artifacts at the center of social practices and at the center of institutions. So, some of the foundations. This is a picture of Jannis, incidentally. Data as a lens, to begin with. You've been hearing me now telling these things, but still, I believe the question remains open. Offering data as a lens to study social and economic issues is obviously not a straightforward step. It's not the first thing you think when you study social processes. You go to ideas, histories, all these beliefs, and all these kinds of things. We make the point that in today's world, data are also an important means for approaching people, communities, and bigger social entities. And this goes against what I have said already. It goes against the pervasive and unarticulated, most of the times, understanding of data as technical elements at a remove from the stage of social action. One thing social action, another thing data. At a remove from institutional transformation. We say that this is not a straightforward step, and me and Cristina, we had to fight to create this book. We want to establish a discourse for this book, and I remember when as a younger and eager man, I was trying to promote another understanding of organizations and markets. One of my successful colleagues told me, Jannis, it's always easier to join a conversation rather than to begin one. Establishing a conversation in the social sciences is very, very difficult, nearly impossible. Whether we will succeed with this, we will see. But we have good signs that after many articles we have published, and this book, quite a few people are attending to what we've been saying, and these people come from all frontiers of social science, including management and information systems. So, some of these perceptions of data as technical artifacts are also reinforced by the central role which digital technologies play in the contemporary world, and also the central role that digital technologies and data play for companies like Google, Facebook, all the big beasts that dominate our society. Discourses about databases, technical discourses, standards and protocols of data transmission, computational methods in AI, and after all, digital materiality, as we say, the way digital computers need to have strong hardware at the very bottom to be able to process information, and specifically information in forms of images and other very difficult hardware consuming elements. All of these, I say, reinforce the image of data as just technical artifacts and tends to hide their social nature. Together with this goes what since approximately, I would say, 10, not more than 12 or 13 years ago, has hesitantly begun to be called data science, and data science programs have been instituted originally as data analytics, then as data science, in most famous universities in the world, from Harvard. Berkeley was the first one to introduce these programs of education in data science. So data science basically grew and became an important field of social reflection. It's basically a technical approach for addressing issues of optimization within particular social practices or organizations, but also important approaches for dealing with societal issues such as traffic and crowd management in big cities, the issues of smart cities, the environment, education and healthcare. These are typical themes that data science tells us. If you gather enough data and you crunch them appropriately, you may be able to produce a good understanding of what's going on and therefore form the basis for successful interventions. And the focus on data, the focus of data science, the understanding of data in data science is basically derived from statistics, where the data encodes events out there in the world. Basically, events, for this to be recorded, they have to be unified occurrences of the same thing. This is a fundamental presumption of statistics. All happenings in statistics, despite one and another difference, are being put into a bucket as the same things, and that's how you count them, as instances of the same thing, and then you perform a number of operations upon it. This is true, and you can do a number of things with this, but it's not the only things you can do, and there are other things as well. We will open up into this. But before I do this, I need also to raise some concerns. The few times I've been in contact also with people here in Greece, I see that the dominant motive behind the understanding of data is that of surveillance. And this is also a very narrow understanding of data. So it's obvious that data participate in something we can call surveillance in general. Perhaps if we have time, we will speak about it. We have written an excursus in this book, it's chapter 5, in which we primarily deal with the question of surveillance and why it's so conservative in its understanding of what's going on in society. It's conservative, Mr. Gavroglou, I say. Yeah, some of these people will define themselves as left people, as my friend Susanna Zubufas told me. We think that something like surveillance is going on, but it doesn't exhaust the variety of things that are done in data between people and communities. It's a very generic claim taken at a distance that simplifies the complexity and ambiguity of the social fabric and of contemporary societies, and also embodies an understanding of surveillance that has very little to do with Michel Foucault, the man that made surveillance such an important thing in social analysis, and moves toward Orwell, which is a simplified view of a center controlling everybody. That's the notion of George Orwell, more or less. It's more complex than that, but if we are to make a difference between Foucault and Orwell, we will say that this is a fundamental difference. In Foucault, surveillance is both positive and negative. It creates subject. And this idea has been taken further by Ian Hacking, that succeeded Foucault in the Collège de France, and has continued this debate and given it directions which are really, really interesting. It's also a discourse which is largely legalistic, speaks of primacy in individuals as contained units away from the community and the social, as atomized cells have to be protected by the invasive power of technology, which is also true to some degree, but also very simplified. We want to raise, therefore, our voice against what we feel the exaggerations of the surveillance discourse. We need to approach these issues with more openness, we believe, and the dominant discourse in surveillance within the social sciences today doesn't do that. So we take us back into something which forms a fundamental idea of the book, that data are not statistical data points, they are not technical elements that computer scientists deal with in hardware, but they are elements through which we mark and mediate a reality, either within or outside us. They perform a variety of semantic and meaningful functions in the way they do, and we have to analyze this way, but we need to take this step and need to mark this difference against, I say again, a widespread assumption that data is something that statisticians and computer scientists do. That's not true. We will see in a little while that data are in our daily life and in the life of institutions. We therefore open up this, drawing on semiotics and other sciences like information science and cognitive theory, to say that data are carriers of facts as data define these facts. They are carriers of feelings and emotions as these are defined by the way likes or tags or shares, for instance, in social media are being defined, and we need therefore to approach and see how data are being used in these functions to construct facets of reality which are being offered to us either as a way of reacting or even as a way of buying goods and services.
Perhaps here it may help making an example, because this is a passage that may feel a little bit hostile. So one of the most interesting things that we looked at some point was the use of wearables. So this is really diffusing a lot. No, we are now wearing watches or Fitbit or whatever we measure. We count our steps, we count the kilometers that we are doing. So what does that mean to apply this kind of more complex lens or framework in the understanding of data, and why we want to do that? So a sort of data science perspective or statistical perspective, the common understanding of data would just measure, use this data, an instrument of measurement, and build services and options on top of that. So therefore the critique to that, like the most straightforward, is this surveillance. Oh no, my God, these are instruments of surveillance. You know, it's very dangerous if they are applied, for instance, to workers and so on and so forth. But we say, and we want to say here with this instrument of perception and reality making, no, wait a second. How are these data made? Who decides which step to count? How steps should be counted? What kind of technology are designed inside these wearables that effectively count for everybody the same step, or for everybody the same pulse? By just studying a couple of examples, and I think it was the option of Apple versus Fitbit, we understand that, as usual, business constraint entered in the decision of which lead to apply for the counting of pulse, and some of this company that applied a red lead rather than a green, now I don't remember which color, basically ended up not counting pulse for darker skin tones. So the result was basically that you had something that nobody questioned, because those are taken as fact. The count of pulse is taken as fact, is not inquired, is not unpacked, is not questioned, as an instrument of perception, of reality making, where decisions are being made, where tradition insists, with constraint, business constraint, you know, money constraint, whatever, choices. No, they are just taken as something given. And as given, because they are not unpacked, they then can create opportunities as well as a number of problems, such as, for instance, the fact that an entire class of people with darker skin tones is not given the same services, the same opportunities, even a medical opportunity, because their pulse is not red. So I wanted to insist on this because it has like a practical example.
A lot of discriminations and predilections embodied in the making of data.
Yeah, but this is also the way in which we can open up a discussion around data, which is a discussion of data as making reality, as an instrument of perception, as essential semiotic function that mark and encode events. Now with this, it's sort of perhaps grounded into something that we all use in some way. Kind of.
Yeah.
So
it's very good. Thanks for making this, Cristina. Yeah. Not to mention also that on the basis of this data you can build a healthcare system.
yeah, exactly.
That's what Apple wants to do now.
Google is doing already.
Yeah, Google is doing it. So you see there how the small and insignificant data becomes the basis for reforming the healthcare system that has been active in modern societies, operant in modern societies for more than 100 years now. There's a lot of things you can say about that, but this is also a clear link about how data are linked with our personal way of living, the way we understand ourselves, the way we connect with others, but also how these can become the basis for building up institutions and institutional patterns. So they are also data. We've been saying that there are elements, semiotic elements, that are used to mark and perform reality, but they are also tools of knowledge and performing reality. They can gather together. You can order this data to describe social states or some types of events. They can be traffic in the cities, They can be a number of people that are suffering from particular illnesses, whatever. So we can use therefore data in this way to dissect social and economic problems by assembling, aggregating and computing several kinds of records. And we give this small example here. And finally, data to some little bit wrap up these definitional aspects to are also media of communication, guys. An important media of communication. I juxtapose, and I want to remind, I was more than juxtaposed than this conception of data with the conception of data as technical or statistical artifacts. The media of communication is the way we share data with others, we use them to collaborate with others and communicate with others, and they are also elements through which institutions in particular transfer them from one setting to another and therefore mediate different states of the world or different states of one or another thing to others. They can also reuse data. Reusing is also an aspect of communication. So this, therefore, I sum up. What did I say? What do I try to say? Well, we say that data are more than technical artifacts and more than instruments for surveillance. They are important cognitive and semiotic elements used to create a world, to know about this world and to communicate about this world and interfere with this world. So this sums up this first part of definitions and why we think that the problematization of data and the opening up of the types of entities they are and critically the functions they perform for individuals, but also, I repeat, for communities and societies is very important. Now, we want also to say a few things for what we call the apparatus, because data, and also make some qualifications with respect to widely used arguments today. I don't know about how it is here in Greece. I see sometimes reading the newspapers that all these journalists speak about algorithmic society, algorithmic, what do they mean by this? It's very unclear to me, and perhaps it will become also unclear to you now when I'm saying a few things. So I will present our view of this apparatus, but also say and make some differentiation against the limited use of some of these ideas. So, granted therefore the ongoing technological amendment of data, it's reasonable to ask the question, but all these digital transformations that are being occurring now in our society, don't they have an effect? Don't they narrow down the role that data play as cognitive artifacts? Don't they limit what we can do with this data? This is a good question. So how the technological nature, therefore, and the formalized operations that are embodied in software, and now lately also in what we call AI, how do these shift and remake the semiotic, cognitive, and communicative aspects of data? This is an important question, and it's a question we can't answer for good, but it's one that needs to be put at the center of modern society and the analysis of modern society. So the key attributes of digital data tend to tell the story that the digitization, that the involvement of software and of digital technologies in the production and sharing of data transform them into something narrower, more limited than the use of data in history. And we will have to say a few things about that in a little while, bear with me. we describe in the book, we have a few pages where we are at pains to say the foundations of computing based on some important figures who some of you may have heard, like John von Neumann and more Claude Shannon, and his theory of communication in where machines play a critical role, and how Shannon's view of machines reacting to syntactic tokens has formed the foundations of computing and raises the inevitable question I mentioned before, to which degree computerization, digitization and AI transform the open nature of data into something limited and therefore which can be used only in very particular ways. And the dominant picture of this, as we described it, is as data as agnostic. Basically, they don't care about the content and the context they convey. That's why the machine can take care of the data and make the transmission itself. Otherwise, it cannot transform meanings. It can transform only syntactic tokens. They are agnostic and homogenizing in the respect that all systems of human expressions for text, image and sound can be handled underneath by the same devices and technologies. And they are also non-neutral in the way me and also Cristina clearly made here. All this conundrum of what digital technologies advancing digitization has made to data raise this fundamental question as to whether data still can be seen as social artifacts and as artifacts of which we call of cognition and knowledge. And we say, yes, this is a fundamental issue, but one that we need to open up and discuss. You will ask me questions and I will have probably the opportunity to say one or another thing about these things. But the point of here of summarizing this discussion is that our data still in the digital age cannot be divested. They are significant and communicative functions. They still remain, no matter how technically they are analyzed. There are differences between different domains, yes, but they still, whether in the form of social data. By social data we mean the data that are produced by TikTok, Facebook, which are data basically that encode human interaction on the web. Whatever you do in these platforms is a click. Like, tag, share. This click is going somewhere in a data repository and it's being then aggregated with other likes and tags or what, and shares and follows and whatever, and out of this are constructed personalities of people and communities. This is an obvious social function of data. So we still say therefore that whether in the form of social data, but also in the form of transaction data, which means for platforms like Amazon where you buy, or OpenTable, or other of these platforms, or even in the form of sensor data that Cristina analyzed before, this example. The incidents of life that pass through the lenses of digital data unavoidably embody operations of definition, filtering, describing, or otherwise positing away things should be or are a meaningful reality and intervening upon it. And this is one, therefore, I've been spending some time, I don't know how far I've been successful in conveying this fundamental discussion between meaning versus procedure, which the diffusion of digital data gives rise in every moment in which digital data are used to encode interaction, to encode social facts, use these facts to do one or another thing. you will ask me some of the things. I hope that I have conveyed the fundamental message why data needs to be opened up and problematized, at the same time as we need to take into account the transformations into the nature of data that have been brought about by digital data. Now Cristina will say some of these things and make some comparisons.
Yeah, before you move from this slide, I just wanted to make a quick observation that this may seem, kind of very theoretical, abstract question. If you think about ChatGPT and all artificial intelligence, the last wave of large language model, you really understand that this is exactly the kind of question they beg us to question and to answer. Well, answer, I don't know to what extent we can still answer to them, because this is really fast evolving technologies, but these are machines that analyze languages without understanding languages, but with computing words. So they count the occurrences of words that are transformed into tokens, basically mathematical sign. So this is meaning versus procedure. How do they do that? How successful they are? What are the dangers in this? To what extent they can effectively restitute to a social reality something that is still meaningful? So I just wanted to say, because something like this is really right, what are they talking about? Meaning versus procedure. But that's what we're talking about, what we confront every day as big questions, but also as small questions. Every time we open ChatGPT.
I can also give me the opportunity also, perhaps making this discussion a little bit less abstract with examples. A friend of ours, a prominent Italian journalist, Luca De Piazza, he asked me to write a small article about the future of translation in a modern world. And I've done some inquiries myself. I knew a number of things, but there were a few things that I didn't know either, and I've learned through. And it's amazing how translation is moving quickly through AI into something which we can call machine or automated translation. But a view of language, someone that understands the richness of language as a system of interaction, but also as a system of knowledge, understands that there is a lot of ambiguities in this language. The machines can't handle ambiguities. So they have to reduce the ambiguities into something which the machine can handle. And that is happening with something which is called natural language processing. It's a huge field today on the basis of which ChatGPT is being based. And coming back into the translation issue, you see now how much of this translation, or what sort of translations can be. I don't know whether you have ever tried to use these translations. To some things they are successful, but the more complex issues you raise, the more you understand that their answers are not exactly. And the reason is that natural language processing is now at a certain level. It will become better in a little while. How better, I don't know, but we need to construct and we need to attack these issues, we need to approach these issues, and we need to understand what is getting won and what is getting lost by these things. And these debates require another approach to data and another approach of how data are being used. In the translation, the training of the machine is done by pairs of words in two languages. So you have one language, the target language, or the source language, and the target language where you want to translate. And then you input a huge number of pairs of words that you have derived from the internet, from Wikipedia, from other documents, and ask the machines to calculate statistically the probability of this pair occurring together. And that's how the translation is being done. Machines do not understand, they calculate. And these issues we need to approach, because the machines can do wonderful things, as we've seen with some of this ChatGPT, really. But we need also to understand what they cannot do and what we risk losing or misperceiving due to their diffusion. A final word, and I want to finish to give you a little bit of time, Cristina, and we will wrap it up. Don't be, I think we are on time, more or less. Yeah. So I wanted also to say a few words about that. Many of the things we say give data an important role. It asks us to think how data are being produced, on the basis of which assumptions and definitions they're being produced, and how they're being shared through the technical capacities of the digital systems that we used in abundance. But we have seen also, both of us, and along with us a few other colleagues, the use of the word algorithms sometimes to describe this process, which we also think is overboard, or it's a bit too exaggerating. The variety of functions that data perform, as we try to say in this slide, as reality filters, instruments of knowledge and media of communication, they cannot be understood solely in terms of algorithms. They are much more complex. On the one hand, many of the huge importance of data in the modern world is because data are being used to encode social interaction, how we communicate with one another, what we do, and how all these things we do with one another, with ourselves and systems, are being recorded and made incidents. These require access always to particular events that are being encoded, and they cannot be just summarized by the function of algorithms. I know this is now a very complex debate, but what we want to say here is that the word algorithm is being used very often also in exaggeration, and has been described as doing magical things, whereas what happens at the bottom is a much more complex system of operations in which data are important, in which the forms by which data encode the events of life are important, and where also these technologies do a number of things which can scarcely be reduced into to the notion of algorithms. Cristina, I pass it to you to say some words about the history of data.
So I think perhaps the most relevant thing, or something that may be useful for you in your research, is therefore how do we approach these changes? From what we already know, how do we unpack, or how do we question the role of data in our society from a perspective that is the one of humanities, of historical interest, or and why we should do that? Because to signal or to mark the differences between what data, because data have always been there. So what data did before the advent of digital technology, and the differences with what data can do now. And why the role of data in society has changed across history, and to what extent these changes are attributable to digital technologies. And to what extent some of these things did not change. So some of the function, as Jannis described, for instance, the sense making or the institution building, are still woven into data work, but yet with a twist. and the twist is this, what we try to understand. So here it is a little bit the reason why an historic outlook over data can be useful, but also can be, I think, what I'm trying to say, a way of access the study of data, digital technology and digital society from the humanistic science point of view. So, for instance, by asking this question we found out...
If you want to control it.
Oh, that's fine, I can also come closer. We found out, I hope you still see the slides, that again, one of the fundamental functions that data performed even in the early Mediterranean, and we are talking about 8,000 years ago, was to record an action performed in a given situation. So because that action, such as a transaction, an exchange of goods, was recorded into data, and in this case in clay tokens, this little clay thing that you see that were shaped, cone, you know, ball or animals, and each of them signal a particular kind of good that was exchanged, a ship, a day of work, or I don't know, like food. So because these transactions were encoded into this little thing, and this little thing were exchanged and given, and they could be accumulated, therefore something a little bit more complex could be thought and taken as the basis of the development of practices and institutions, such as the one of taxation. I'm not joking. Thanks to data, people could be taxed for their day of work or for their transaction. And institutions such as the temple, in this case, or administration, that was responsible for taxation. So you had this little bowl, or you know, satchels or bag, where you could accumulate, I don't know, 5, I don't know, like cones and 5 little balls, and that signaled that in a month you had work 5 days and exchanged by 5 ships, and therefore you could be taxed because of that. So the point is that you don't have institution if you don't have records of action data. You don't have institution, you don't have complex social practices if you cannot memorize, if you cannot extrapolate, you know, things that happened from the moment and the situation in which they happened. How could you count them? How could you record them? How could you pass over them? And this is a little bit the same idea that one of the, well, you know, I think best historian or business historian, Alfred Chandler, took to demonstrate and narrate the birth of early American corporation. So we're talking about the end of 19th century with the advent of railroads, of telephone. So the economy, the production, the means of production and the economy in America changed completely. So then this Alfred Chandler understood or tried to study what happened. And one of the main reasons, you know, behind, you know, the advent of this big technological change was that the means of production and the kind of organization dealing with production changed, because all of a sudden they become bigger and they had to coordinate their action across time and space. So there was, I don't know now, a steel production company that has the headquarters in Washington, but then the production it was in Tampa. So how can you coordinate these two? So you need records.
All the time as well.
You know, and you need a record of production. And how do you ship? And how do you control what you have in stock? And how do you control who works for you and how much? So all the advent of measurement, recording, data, new kind of data, new object out of data, new object of measurement. For instance, the ratio between, you know, profit and loss. So the need of computing all this data that were recorded to understand better the action inside the company and therefore growing. the company, but also perfecting the art of administration. So one of the historian we use to narrate this, to reconstruct the links between data and institution, Joan Yates said that administrator without data is like music without notes. So you can orchestrate, you know, the work of administration only if you have a script, and the script is made of data that, you know, tell you something about what you need to administrate. So I think this little excerpt wants to signal the fact that the links between data and institution has always been very strong in our society. So therefore, the way we approach the revolution of data is not just a revolution of numbers or surveillance, but it's the question of what happens to our institutions as data become digital, as they open new way of working with data, of meaning construction with data, of living with data. What happens in the way we understand our society, and therefore we build. Well, we decide, we understand it means what kind of possibility of knowing our society and therefore of acting upon it we have. So those are bigger questions, but someone has to ask them, at least, you know. We need to start to ask some of these questions, even if many will be left unattended, but at least, you know, start a conversation around what can we do, or, you know, how can we open up the study of data beyond data science. And we continue a little bit, therefore, you know, tracing the history of data and jumping. Sorry for these big jumps, but I understand that I cannot tell you 8,000 years of history.
We don't do history.
At 7 o'clock in the evening, so I'll jump like 3,000 years.
We don't do history, as you
Yeah,
said
also,
yourself.
yeah, we don't do history, but we use, I think we use some historical episodes to learn how to approach what is going on today. So that's the kind of learning, I think, and operationalizing of history that we do. We are not historians, of course, but we learn. And also I think we open the conversation of how else we can sort of unpack the function of data in society by understanding what they did before. So jumping to today and equipped with this sort of knowledge of what data have done and what kind of link they built with the institution, then we can ask, okay, so how do digital data operate in this society, in current institution? What is it that we have to look in order to understand what is changing? And how do they make things differently? So one way, and then we have actually accumulated quite a bit of empirical work on this, for us has been to look at the work of data and through data the social media platform have done. And this has been something that we used to understand, for instance, how differently we interact, because our interaction today are mediated by data. And one thing that has happened in these last 10 years, since we began to study social media platform, is that the modalities of interactions that have been championed by social media platform now have extended everywhere. So basically, even public services now, they are platformized, right? So there is the like, there is the review, there is the comment, there is the rating. You understand what I'm saying? You book a restaurant, you do the same thing. You date, you do the same thing. You rate, you swipe, you tag. So kind of all the social interaction that before belonged to different domains of life and to different interaction orders and to different institutions, as they are structured via these technologies and this data, they become somehow similar. They resonate to one another. They have the same technology. So this is the sign also that the institution will be changing and are changing, and we are seeing this. And let me tell you this with an example. And we studied also music, and we had this. I think it's very telling, and more than perhaps giving you another shot of history or theoretical sort of idea. Let me give you an example of how the establishment and the changes triggered by digital technologies have changed data at the basis of music institution, and this has changed the way we consume music, the way we produce music, but also the way the institution linked to music work. And you can recognize a little bit here, like, you know, the vinyl. No, I know that now they are coming back, but follow me, you know, as they were sort of the only way of listening music before. You wanted to say something?
No. They will never come back. They will come back as visitors.
They are, yeah, visitors, or, you know, collectibles, or, you know, but not as the basis of institution. Yeah, I thought, okay, here you have like a product that you cannot change. Data that are only linked to content and little else. Song that you cannot skip. I mean, okay, you could sort of, but you understand, you cannot break them. You cannot, you know, the producer, once he sells you this, he cannot take it back and change it. These things seems obvious, but they aren't, because now they can. Now they can take back a song and can change it. They can add more data and they can give it back to you.
With other songs.
With other song or whatever, because you are subscribing a service, you are not buying a product any longer. And this is possible because a product doesn't exist any longer. What it exists is a set of data that are assembled together on the go. You don't have music in your iPod. The iPod doesn't exist any longer, but, you know, phone or whatever. You just have a link to a platform that once you ask to play the music, you fetch the data from 10,000 sources. You put them together, and the result, you listen some song. Okay, so this whole thing means that there are tons of different institutions, not just music labels, artists, but also platforms, but also data aggregators, but also, you know, data analytic companies, but also trend companies, and whatever that work for music listening, or the music listening business. And this, of course, has changed as well music production, the way we consume music, the way music is written, and the fact that now we use many different data that go into music listening behavior. This is an example.
It's a good example also of what you're saying. Not only business practices are being changed, social life is being changed.
Absolutely, yeah.
And the two are interlaced. That is one of the things we try to speak about in the book. The difference between institutions and persons is not any longer what it was before. The two of them are being linked through these technologies. And here is a good example, because the user or the person is inside the system that produces and consumes the data.
So yeah, this is, for instance, a simplified version of what Spotify used to recommend music, and it uses several different systems that use several different kind of data. So this is also very interesting. So that a product that was linked only to music, like the sound, now is linked to data that are fetched through analyzing user behavior, fetched by text, fetched by sound. So the discussion that or the point Jannis made about this homogenizing property of data, you can see it here. So you can see that because of digital technology and the transformation in the nature of data, things that weren't possible before now are possible, and this thing may change the way we behave. Again, not just the business, but also the way we behave, because we are suggested. With music, we use list or whatever. So one of the things that we advance in the book is the fact that this idea of platforms is not just a technological infrastructure to mediate our interaction, but it's also a new institution that is pushed forward that can better deal with the nature of data and is taking the place of older or more traditional institutions. So the philosophy or the logic of platform organizations, so the institution of platform, is something that goes beyond the fact that they effectively allow us to do things. They are becoming now the first and foremost or prominent institution of our life, of our society. This connects to what I was saying before. Once things become, you know, a little bit the same across different domains of life, then the way we do things belongs to certain institutional order, and if this institutional order it's always, you know, linked back to a platform, it means that platform is the main institution of our time. Platform intended as a form of organizing, not
all
as
this
a given
TikTok,
platform.
Google, Facebook, Spotify, all these, they have the format of the platform. This is very different than General Electric and General Motors and Fiat and Siemens. They are completely different. And this is something which what we intend by when we say reinventing the market economy. You remake the fabric of production and consumption through the functions of data we've been trying to analyze here. You make also society. Our focus is mostly on in the second part of the book, on the institutions of what we call market capitalism.
So it's important to think also that these modalities of organizing social life, exchanges, transaction, they are now in banking, they are now in healthcare, they are now, so it's not just, you know, social media platform or TikTok, but it's like really when we had the entrenched institution like of modernity, now we are having something that works differently, that works through data and is organized or coordinated via platforms. So, and this is, I think, should push for a little bit more attention, I guess.
We will conclude here,
yes.
Giorgos, with this. I think we said enough. All these converges into our claim, which I also originally developed. Why do we need to approach data differently? Why we need to do research into the many functions that data perform in modern society and economy, analyze these functions and understand the shifting web of interactions, how the fabric of economy and society is changing, and analyze them. It's an important instrument for doing this, which we call towards the social science of data. I think we will finish here.
Yeah, it will be interesting to hear them now.
It's
I think
important
we talked too
to hear
much.
with some of you. Yeah. Thank you for being patient. Thank you for listening to us.